Google just told the Canadian government we will not build a backdoor into our products ever. Think about how insane.
I'm getting pretty freaking mad with Canada and a population that seems to be okay with what's going on. New revelations coming out from a special force officer admitting that intelligence assets were deployed on Canadians during the Ottawa protests, so we'll take a look at that. Boy, has Bill C-22 stirred up the hornet's nest, with tech companies sounding the alarm, or worse, most of them making a dash for the exit door and wanting to leave Canada. And to be honest, I don't blame them one bit, but how will that affect you and I going forward? And to top it all off, this video probably won't even make it to your feed thanks to the new provisions being rolled out of Bill C-11. Because now the Liberals control the content that gets recommended to you. Yeah, I really hope you like Rosemary Barton or David Cochran's freaking head, because from now on, that's all your eyes are allowed to see. My name is Ali Daniel, and this is The Right Call. Like, share, subscribe, hype this video up. Any and all interaction are now required to push this video out so that more people get the truth and maybe someday break that CBC-induced coma that so many Canadians are under. And if you're tired of the same old government and media BS and finally want some common sense commentary, well then smash that subscribe button, because this video won't be recommended and only subscribers get to see it. Man, I'm gonna need a heck of a lot more Nutella if I want to make it through this episode. So Captain Brian Isted, a retired Canadian Armed Forces intelligence specialist, details how a small Canadian Special Operation Forces plane was flying patterns above the Freedom Convoy, scraping data from every device present.
Back in 2022, sort of at the height of the convoy protest in Ottawa, there was a CANSOF signals intercept plane that was seen circling above the protest. So use signals intercepting technology. And by signals, I mean a phone, a computer, any smart device that's able of sending or receiving data can be intercepted remotely. So this plane flew over top of Canadians quietly protesting next to their, and I don't say this as hyperbole, like I lived in Ottawa during this. I went to the convoy to see what was going on. There were bouncy castles and hot dog stands and free coffee for families, and it was not at all January 6th in Canada like the media portrayed it like that.
And this is even more damning considering the credibility that this man has, because he was present, he was on the ground. The media kept claiming that this was an insurrection, January 6th style in Canada, that Canada, the parliament, was under attack by lunatics. Well, it turned out it was legitimately just a quiet, calm protest.
It has nothing to do with reality, but we had Canadian Forces assets flying over top of the convoy in what would be called a scraping pattern. So scraping is just basically flipping the switch on that turns on these collection capabilities so that now every single person on the ground there within range of this plane, so everybody that's there that has their phone, everyone carries their phone all the time, is now pinging this plane as if it's a cell phone tower kind of thing. And this plane now knows who you are, because most people's phone numbers are attached to their phone, unless you have a burner that you bought at 7-Eleven or something. Like your phone number has your name. So now they have your passwords, your pictures, your messages, your call logs, like absolutely everything. And this was very likely to have been done by the Canadian military on Canadian people. And that is highly unethical and highly illegal. This isn't one or two people whispering to each other in a dark room saying, oh, let's go do a spy mission, and probably nobody knows about it. A lot of people knew about this. It absolutely happened. And from the email traffic that's been dug up through ATIPs, they're just trying to hide it. And this is a scary level of government overreach that I've been trying to talk about for a couple years now, that the military is absolutely trying to hide. The federal government seems like they're absolutely trying to hide this. And we need some daylight on this to know what actually happened.
Well, let that be the daylight, because we need to know what happened. If it turns out to be true that the Canadian government allowed intelligence officers and intelligence assets to spy on Canadians, this is bigger than the NSA and Edward Snowden in the US. This is a deliberate, not a passive, but rather an active act of spying on Canadians that were protesting against the government. That should scare everyone very deeply. And now, with Bill C-22, expect a lot more spying to be done on Canadians. Obviously, the government will say it's to keep you safe. But instead, let's listen to an actual CSIS spy.
We listened to what they had to say. And this new legislation, Bill C-22, balances the needs of law enforcement with the privacy and civil rights that Canadians demand. And I want to be clear what C-22 is not. It is not about surveillance of Canadians going on about their daily lives. It is about keeping Canadians safe in the online space.
Provisions in Bill C2 are going to give CSIS significant advantage in terms of providing us with the building blocks of investigations for us to be able to go to a telecommunications service provider, ask them the simple yes/no question in terms of whether a service has been provided to an individual that we have reasonable reason to suspect is potentially involved in a national security threat. That will give us and our investigators significant advantage in terms of providing us with that building block information that will then allow us to move beyond that requirement of minimally intrusive to seek a warrant to be able to get the additional information.
Did you hear that? Reasonable suspicion that something is being committed. And knowing that they've deployed intelligence assets on people just protesting, what does reasonable suspicion mean to them now? Is it just, you're not in agreement with the government? That's reasonable enough to suspect you? Okay, so what does it actually do? It forces all technology companies, whether it be hardware or software, to do two things. The first is to keep all your data, metadata, IP address, usage information, login details for up to 1 year. This is in contradiction, by the way, of the Charter of Rights and Freedom against unreasonable searches and seizure, but I digress. This right there is already concerning enough as is, but I want to bring your attention to the second point that it forces companies to do, because that one is considerably more insidious. It forces companies to create backdoor access to your devices in order for the government to access it. I want you to take a second and to really digest this. This is not limited to your phone, to your computer. This is all technology providers. So, for example, your Ring doorbell camera, on the front door, they could access that. Your Google HomePod or Amazon Alexa, accessible. Your smart fridge, not a problem. Your smart TV, the parallels with 1984 right there are striking, but your smart TV, yes. It can all be used to turn on the cameras, turn on the microphone, access, read, decode, listen. All of it is now legal. And most importantly, this is not done through a court order, a warrant, anything that the government needs to prove that you're a threat to national security. No. This can be done even through what's called a secret ministerial order. So Gary, creepy Gary, can just write down a little order, call it secret. Nobody can see it. No judicial review. You can't even freaking know about it in the first place because the companies that receive the order are barred from disclosing that they've gotten access to your information. This is all done under the guise of shadowy figures. Disgusting.
Companies that have smart devices in homes advertise that the microphones can't be turned on remotely so that they can listen. Under this legislation, can order these companies to provide the capabilities to turn on a remote microphone. Is that correct?
Or the ordering of intercept capability. So that would be an intercept capability. And now you could potentially have an order that would require that capability. And as long as it didn't create a systemic vulnerability, yes, it could be implemented.
Now, that kind of creates a bit of a conundrum because what if it's a secret ministerial order?
So, true.
Gotcha.
I don't have an answer for you.
And you'd think that this would be something that the mainstream media would dig their teeth into due to the sheer privacy concerns it creates. We are turning Canada literally into a spy state, a tyrannical state. This is no hyperbole here, but not a peep. Yet, if you look at the very same mainstream media, say back in 2012, well, it's something they would have spoken up against.
My guess is if the average citizen was told that they had 5 minutes left to live and they were alone in their house, a good percentage of Canadians would devote 2 or 3 of those last minutes on Earth to erasing their hard drive. Not because they're criminal, but because it might contain something that's, what's the expression I'm looking for? Nobody's business. And that includes the Minister of Public Safety, Vic Taves. Now, Vic's a nice guy, but he's got this thing. He likes to peek, or at least he wants to peek into your hard drive. He wants to be able to get your computer's IP address without a warrant. He wants all of your computer online traffic recorded. How much money you make, what you read, where you get your news, what you say to your best friend, what turns you on, and how you vote. Canadians aren't that stupid. We're not going to let you peek. That doesn't make us criminal. It makes us Canadian. It's why we shut our blinds at night. The state has no business in the hard drives of the nation. Convince a judge, get a warrant.
Man, couldn't have said it better. Can't believe I'm agreeing with CBC, but CBC circa 2012 and CBC circa today, two different machines. Also, I take a second to admire just how clean Toronto was back then. And there's also a certain lack of headwear around the streets, putting it out there. But what he said in the video is absolutely true, and it is the core belief of Canada's democracy that there is a right and an expectation to privacy. And whether it was the Conservatives then or the Liberals today, the mainstream media had a problem with it, and they worked together to push the message so that people were aware, and the people that are aware can fight back. But nowadays, not a single word is being spread. And we're here, myself and plenty of other independent creators, trying to get the message out. And that's being suppressed. I'll talk about that in a second. But regardless, some liberals, however, who still have common sense, which I didn't think was such a thing, didn't think it was possible, are pushing back.
The motion calls on the House to recognize the fundamental right of all Canadians to freedom of speech, communication, and privacy, an affirmation of on the need for these rights to be respected. The mark of a democratic society is how it balances collective security with individual rights and freedoms. In terms of grounds for accessing people's information without a warrant. Privacy commissioners across the country, nationally, provincially, said that this bill goes too far. This is a bad piece of legislation. And I'll quote the federal privacy commissioner. On balance, the new bill contains serious privacy concerns. In particular, we're concerned about access without a warrant to subscriber information behind an IP address. The Ontario Privacy Commissioner had a great deal of concern about this bill, called it an encroachment of surveillance as it's presently configured in the bill, that the bill is wrong, that it terrifies her. This freedom is not based on the state accesses whatever information they want on its citizens. No, the state is supposed to have a reason, and the collection of information from citizens is supposed to be limited and for particular purposes that are specifically identified to individuals. And her view is that that is under attack with this bill. The bill creates a structure for this kind of widespread surveillance. This is going to be like the Fort Knox of information that the hackers and the real bad guys will want to go after. This is going to be a gold mine. So it's not surprising that given that response by privacy commissioners, who know whereof they speak, one would hope, that people in civil society became concerned and started to speak out.
And speak out we did, not only us, individuals, but also the tech companies that are going to be forced to do the government's dirty bidding and spy on us. CoinKite, which kind of find the name funny, came out and said, C-22 will cost Canadians good manufacturing jobs, ours included. We're already working on leaving. This bill just accelerates the timeline. You can't build privacy hardware in a country that mandates surveillance backdoors. C-22 is tyranny dressed up as public safety. Elbows up, babe. The NordVPN. We are actively reviewing draft Bill C-22 and will participate in any relevant consultation process available to us. However, should Bill C-22 pass in its current form, and if we are subjected to mandatory obligations, there isn't a scenario in which we would compromise our no-log architecture or encryption protections. To prevent this, we will consider all viable options, including limiting or, if necessary, removing our presence from Canada's jurisdiction. And here's a list of other companies summed up. Meta, which obviously that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, opposes Part 2, warning it could force backdoors or spyware installation. Testified before Parliament, this bill would conscript private companies into service as an arm of the government surveillance apparatus. Apple publicly warned that the bill could force encryption backdoors and undermine device security. And they were quoted saying, this legislation could allow the Canadian government to force companies to break encryption by inserting backdoors into their products, something Apple will never do. Glad to hear it. And it's true, by the way. Apple is known. And that's something that Steve Jobs was unapologetic about. Data privacy. It's your data. You own it. No one has access to it unless you want to. And security is at the forefront of all of their architecture. Windscribe, which is a Canadian VPN provider. This is not an American company. This is a Canadian one. Says that we won't be far behind. He's referring to Signal, which is another company we'll touch in a second. If C-22 passes, in its current state, VPNs would almost certainly require us to log identifying user data. Then you have the CEO of Shopify, which is like one of the only unicorn in Canada, aka like tech companies worth more than $1 billion, because it's damn hard to do anything in Canada worth of value. But anyways, he says C-22 is looking like a huge mistake. It worries me a great deal. There is so much nonsense in there that it may as well end up dealing a death blow to Canadian tech viability. Take it from the word of a man who's done it. Finally, Signal. Signal is a great company. It's basically encrypted communication. If you want to talk to someone secretly, Signal is the gold standard. The VP of Signal said that they would rather pull out of Canada entirely than compromise end-to-end encryption and privacy promises to the users. So Canada might turn into a country, the only country in the world where most tech providers are not operating. And you know what? This plays exactly in the hand of the government. That's what they want. They either want control over those services and those devices, or if they can't get control of it, they don't want you to use it. For them, I believe the government's a win-win. Sure, loss of revenue, and it's going to piss off a few Canadians, but best believe, a lot of liberals are going to say, yeah, but it's for the best. It's for the best of the country. Screw these American tech companies. It's America. They're going to find a reason to blame Trump or something. That's what pisses me off. That's why I'm getting mad. It's like, hey guys, wake up. Like, now's the moment. Now's the moment to say enough is enough. It will get worse. And if people don't think it can, believe me, it does. And if you want a little bit of an idea of just how much worse it can get, look no further than our cousins in the United Kingdom. You know, I spoke about this a few months ago. I made a video. Countries with the highest numbers of arrests for online comments in 2023. Hungary is at 10. Okay, you know what? Maybe it was like a death threat, right? You made a death threat on someone, you were arrested. Okay, Azerbaijan, which is probably not the most democratic country, is 13. Saudi Arabia, which is definitely not the most democratic country, is at 15. Egypt, 20. Vietnam, 45. The US with 340 million people, 50, right? So on and so forth. We get to the United Kingdom. Guess how many?
Tell us.
12,183 arrests for online comments in 2023. That is twice the amount of Belarus, a dictatorial authoritarian regime, at 6,205, more than China at 1,500, more than Russia. We love to say Russia. They're mean, they're bad. Putin's a dictator. Only 400 in Russia. Russia seems like a free speech heaven compared to the United Kingdom. This is what people don't realize. This is ludicrous, and it's coming to your neighborhood real quick. I hate to say it, but did I call it or did I call it? See, that was back then. That was like many months ago, before C9 was even a thing. And C9, to remind you, is the law that jails you for hate speech, for your dank memes on Facebook and your controversial posts on X. Well, Canada now passed C9. And we're going to be following suit. We're going to start seeing headlines just like that. UK free speech crackdown sees up to 30 people a day arrested for petty offenses such as retweets and cartoons. Really? It doesn't take a genius to see what the government's agenda truly is over here. It's about control, both upstream and downstream. And I'll explain a little bit what I mean by that. On the downstream side, we have C9 and C22. They are coming for your post, your thoughts, your encryption. The government wants to censor you if you say bad things and want to prevent you from having so much as a private place to share your thoughts and opinions, especially if they're contrary to the narrative. But on the upstream, they want to prevent you from even having access to content that they deem dangerous in the first place. They want to nix the seed of any independent thought, any question of the narrative, any opposition to their rule, and gain a chokehold on the truth.
Not to be dramatic, but there is something happening with our neighbors in the north of Canada that simply should sound alarms to all free speech and sovereign nations. What's happening in Canada today is a complete threat to free speech, to free thinking, and to sovereignty.
Yeah, what you're seeing there is the results of Bill C-11, the Online Streaming Act. Noticed how on apps like Instagram or Facebook, you can't see the news anymore. When you go on it, you get a nice notice saying that due to Canadian legislation, this content is unavailable in Canada. That is C-11. To understand this law and how tyrannical it really is and how nobody's really talking about it, you have to first go a step back and understand that in Canada, anything to do with telecommunication, whether it be cell phones or broadcasting through waves like airwaves, television channels, newsprint, you name it, any broadcasting has to go through the CRTC. This is our government regulator, the guys that make the rules and enforce the rules. Well, for the longest time, the CRTC had rules regarding what they call Canadian content, CAN-CON, meaning companies like newspapers, broadcasting channels, radio channels had to have a certain amount of Canadian content on their programming. But not only Canadian content, but also a fraction of it had to be French content and another fraction had to be Indigenous content. The kind of stuff, to be honest, that nobody really cares about. But it was presented at the time as it's important to support our artists, our independents, and at face value, it makes sense, especially if you consider that a lot of media company, a lot of broadcasters receive a lot of money, like CBC, $1.4 billion a year, of government funds. So at face value, it would make sense that, hey, we're going to give you money but it comes with some strings attached. You must use the money to promote certain things. That was nice and dandy. But the problem is that all the broadcasters have been going downhill forever. They just never adapted to the current modern reality. News channels have been going down the pooper. Newspapers have been going down the poop chute as well. It's just been a slaughter for them. So the government kept giving more and more and more and more money, but they never adapted. They kept sucking. So the government under Trudeau in 2023 came up with Bill C-11, expanding the power and the authority of the CRTC to also encompass all online platforms. Everything is now considered a broadcaster under the law. Now, mind you, all the platforms fought back. YouTube said, we're not a broadcaster, we're just a catalog of videos. Meta said, hey, we're not a broadcaster, we're just a platform that allows people to share things. Nobody is on there acting as a broadcaster, acting as a news agency, acting as a dedicated artist. This is just social media. But the government didn't want to hear anything about it, and they still passed the law. The first thing this bill did was force these platforms to remit a portion of their Canadian revenue back to the government to be invested in Canadian content. And this is why you can't see news on Meta, because Meta said, screw that. No way, Jose. It makes no sense. We're just going to prevent, for example, news content from ever being even seen on our platform. And the government didn't care. Again, it prevents you and I from getting access to independent news. And the CBC already has monopoly over the news over all the traditional media, so they didn't really care. However, Google, Spotify, they said, fine, we'll contribute a small amount. They negotiated, they agreed on an amount. So, it's kind of like a tax. Actually, not even a tax. It's like blackmail. It's like a racket. It's like protection money that you see the mafia do. You want to open a shop in my neighborhood, you got to pay protection money. It's the exact same thing, just on government scale. But here comes the incredibly insidious second part, which was rolled out just about a month ago. It now forces these platforms like YouTube and Spotify to promote artificially Canadian content. And this creates a massive problems in two ways. The first way, you have to understand how YouTube operates. The only goal of YouTube is to match you as a viewer to a piece of content that will engage you, to keep you on the platform as long as possible, going down a rabbit hole of binging videos. That's all it cares. If it gets that match incorrect, you get mad because you're like, well, the content on YouTube sucks. The creator gets mad because, people are not really watching my video. And YouTube gets mad because they're not making money. It's bad for everyone. It's a lose-lose. But if you're forcing Canadian creators to be promoted at face value, you're like, well, isn't that good? Shouldn't you enjoy that? No, because it's showing content to people that don't consume it. And then here comes the crazy part. The global algorithm doesn't just push your content outright to people. Rather, what it does, it tests this on a small audience and see the performance on that small audience. And if it performs well, it goes to a wider audience, so on and so forth, until it hits the global stage. And at the global stage, this is where the big reach gets. Content creators rely on this for their revenue, for their discoverability, for their growth. But if you're being shown arbitrarily, forced to be shown to Canadians because you're a Canadian content piece that don't interact with your piece, well then the algorithm sees this as a negative signal because they're not watching it, and then your growth dies. Your video gets sent to the gulag and nobody ever sees it. This has been hitting creators hard. The second thing it does is it creates certain media outlets that are considered to be trustworthy by the CRTC and forces all the platforms to recommend and push their content to Canadians, effectively creating an unfair competition on the marketplace. See, when you log into YouTube, there's only so much space in front of your eyes. The best piece of content is shown to you. But instead of this happening right now, I and plenty of other creators have to fight not only against CBC for their quality, and CBC's quality sucks, so no shit, they weren't being seen, but now they're being artificially promoted in front of you at the expense of people like me. Oh, and not just me, I'm a tiny fish in the sea compared to, say, a Jasmine Lane that highlighted just how much this fake algorithmic suppression has been hitting her. She compares her videos from nearly a year ago, showing the ratio of likes, so positive signals on the video, to the amount of total views it got. A video like this one got 17,000 likes for 500,000 views. Another one, 13,000 likes for 250,000 views. And this one, 12,000 likes for 182,000 views. Well, fast forward to today with this new algorithmic suppression. Well, she's getting the same amount of likes. As such, you would think the views would follow in suit. However, we're talking 75,000 views, 72,000 views, 95,000 views. That's a drop of more than half of her views. which, although I have no idea and I'm talking right out of my rear, translates to a pretty good sum of money. But aside from the money being robbed from independent creators, it's robbing the viewer from an independent thought, from a counter narrative, from someone holding truth to power. And she's not the only one sounding the alarm. Wyatt Claypool, Moose on the Loose, they've all made posts showing details and their own analytics showing a drop in reach. Even I, a fairly new channel in this space and much smaller than all of them, have seen a drop. About, I'd say 50% of my reach. The video quality is about the same. I think they're decent videos. I'm looking at the metrics, the CTR, the average view duration, the 30-second skip rate, the total completion, it's looking good. And I was like, why is it not reaching a wider audience? I thought I just freaking sucked. It could be, maybe I do. You tell me, comment down below, how much do I suck? I used all AIs you can think, Grok, Claude, ChatGPT, analyzing all my metrics, and it always came back with the same thing. It's not a video quality issue, it's a distribution issue. YouTube is not showing your video to people. And it couldn't figure out why. Well, now we know why. If you cannot access independent media or any opinions contrary to the state-approved narrative, you end up with blind spots. A bit like how North Koreans think that Kim Jong-un is a god. North Koreans really think that Kim Jong-un cured AIDS and cancer. Kid you not. They think that Kim Jong-un doesn't use the toilet. They think that he could drive by the age of 3. They think that no one is disabled in North Korea. They think that North Korean researchers found unicorns. You get the point. The reason why North Koreans think that is not because they're stupid. It's because the country has a totalitarian control over the information that people receive. As such, well, that's what they believe. Your tax dollars are being used to fund the messaging through C11. Government trusted sources are artificially boosted and promoted, and you cannot opt out of seeing their content. A fake narrative is thus spun as truth, and people, often too busy or too naive, end up trusting it without question. On the downstream, you cannot securely communicate anonymously or privately due to Bill C-22, or worse, you end up being jailed for wrongthink under Bill C-9. Any political opposition is thus neutralized. Any organization is neutered. And those who find a way around it all end up being jailed. What's the end game here? What are they trying to achieve? In my humble opinion, probably something akin to a corporate, state-sponsored censorship. If you cannot consume independent media, thoughts, or opinions that are contrary to the regime narrative, and all this enabled through your tax dollars that are going to fund the state-sponsored narrative, and you cannot securely communicate anonymously and privately, effective opposition is neutralized. They are turning global tech platforms into an automated domestic surveillance apparatus. The private sector built some of the greatest tools for connections, for communications, for consumption, and for knowledge. The internet was supposed to democratize access to information, and the Canadian government is weaponizing it in order to achieve total control over your mind and cement their rule over you. If you've enjoyed this report and find some value in the commentary, well then you need to subscribe because there's a good chance you just won't see this video otherwise. And if you want to take it a step further and help support the channel, I have a Patreon. The link is in the bio. It's $8 a month and it helps keep me independent and also hold truth to power. Any donation is greatly appreciated. And in the meantime, if you want to watch a video where we talk about how Canadians are going bankrupt and how economically things are not looking too good, click on the video right here. I break it all down for you. But for the time being, my name is Elliot Daniel, and I'll see you guys, maybe not, depending if you find a video, on the next report.